Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called They'll Never Have To, written by Teller of Tall Tales. Commander Grovenson marched down the corridor-like road with purpose as he led his men from the front. The operation was going smoothly. His men had crushed 2 of the 4 planetary defense garrisons in their path, while the fleet in orbit took care of the reinforcements. The next objective in their path was not necessarily a military target, but a moral one. The Porton Public School would be a mere stepping stone in conquering this backward planet. Grovenson could already smell the fear and confusion he'd caused by ripping those doors open and executing the instructors. The camera in his helmet would ensure the entire event was televised. Turning a blind corner onto the street leading to the school, Grovenson halted his men. The rapid clatter of the Gauss rifles being raised to armored shoulders filled the air. For a moment, the commander had trouble believing his eyes, much less the image inside his helmet's armored visor. 2 large armored transport shuttles, painted the clinical blues and whites of the planet's prison system, were pushed nose to nose, blocked the road. Standing in front of them, kneeling inside or lying atop the armored hovercraft, were humans clad in fluorescent orange fabric jumpsuits. Some carried rifles, others brandished Kirkata Rahip guns, while the majority simply held vastly outdated handguns. However, no matter how ill-equipped, 2 or so dozen humans with guns were a force to be reckoned with, no matter what uniform they wore, especially when you wander right into their line of fire for some reason. They don't immediately shoot. Something nagged at the back of Grovenson's mind as he held up a clawed hand to stop his men from firing. Perhaps they found an ally of sorts. Of course, a disposable one, as inferior species were, but an ally nonetheless. His eyes locked on one of the humans, who stood away from the rest, simply occupying a spot in the street, roughly halfway between the Grovenson force and the orange-clad convicts. This one also wore orange, but there was something markedly different about them. They wore an unconcerned smile as they used a very large clip-pointed knife to clean beneath their fingernails. Bright, pond-water green eyes roamed over Grovenson's men for an uncomfortably long time. That nagging feeling in the back of Grovenson's mind suddenly shouted at him as those eyes swiveled onto him. Those eyes didn't belong to a man. There was a hunger hidden in their sparkle, a cold, unflinching cruelty that made Grovenson's scales crawl and his blood run even colder. He wasn't looking at a soldier, a guardsman, or even some 2-bit militiaman. A hand fell for his blaster, and he realized exactly what he'd just stepped into the ring with. The way the large knife arced up by the ear in a fraction of a moment suggested military training. But the ferocity of the throw left no doubt in his mind. This was an apex predator, and it had its sights set on him. The knife's tip spiked clean through his visor, stopping mere centimeters from his eye. The force of the impact threw him off balance, forcing him to wobble back like a drunkard, visor spluttering and fizzling uselessly. This sudden eruption of gunfire further disoriented him, so something slammed into his chest and brought him to the ground. The knife was yanked free of his visor before a foot stamped down on his thankfully still helmeted head. However, the force was more than enough to finish off the display in Grovenson's helmet, plunging the commander into darkness. Grovenson rolled onto his stomach, clawing at his helmet as rounds slammed into his body armor and the pavement around him. He eventually managed to hit the latch and yank his helmet off with a growl. Chucking his helmet to the side, the commander drew his blaster and tried to locate the beast that had almost killed him while getting to his feet. Pure chaos surrounded the Gecknocean. Some of his men haphazardly returned fire while also trying to set up their mobile cover. Others were desperately dragging the wounded into buildings for cover, while the rest desperately tried to fight the whirlwind of violence that had pushed its way into the center of the formation. Grovenson watched the human palm one of his soldiers' visors. A moment later, the soldier's body was detached from their head. The decapitated head, still inside his helmet, was tossed into the hands of another stunned stormtrooper before the throat was gashed open. Lurching to his feet, Grovenson drew his blaster pistol and drew a bead on the knife-wielding maniac. Just as he pressed the trigger stud, he felt something slam into his back, and he was pinwheeling through the air. When he hit the ground, he was no longer holding onto his blaster pistol. The sharp impact with the pavement causing his forearm to be extended to catch himself, to buckle with a wet snap. One hot pain shot up Grovenson's arm as he desperately rolled away from an armed death sphere dropped by one of his men after they'd been shot through the visor. The detonation briefly made Grovenson black out as the overpressure displaced every organ in his body. When he was finally able to open his eyes, he was being dragged away from the front line by two soldiers who were quite heavily injured themselves. His groggy sight fell onto the raging human, soaked head to toe in purple blood and gore as they fought all 5 of his men at once, whittling them down cut by cut, blow by blow. He found himself disturbed by the complete and utter lack of noise the humans made as they fought, a manic grin plastered on their face. Letting his head fall back, he gazed up at the sky, and he begged, "Please, Mother, grant me strength to complete this conquest, and I'll build you a temple from their corpses." Strength flooded Grovinson's limbs. His broken arm snapped back into place as his goddess's power coursed through him. He lurched to his feet, realizing that almost all of his men were either dead or too wounded to fight. His eyes locked onto the bestial human as orange-clad convict split open yet another one of his men's unarmored throats. The distance between them seemed to stretch and shrink. Then, a moment later, Grovinson's claws sank into a soft flesh just beneath the human's sternum. The world seemed to fall still and silent as the empowered commander leered at the convict that had given him so much trouble. The human's eyes were wide with shock as they spat up thick red blood. The look of utter shock on the man's face was utterly delectable as Grovinson lifted the convict off the ground, bleeding as their flesh tore under his strain. Yanking his bloody claws free, the Gagnosian commander let the human fall to the ground, knife clattering from their grip as they fell onto their knees and slumped forward. His enhanced hearing picked out the exact moment the human's heart stopped, and he smiled, turned to face the blockade. One of the convicts fired their last shot at him, the round slamming harmlessly into his chest plate as he began marching forward. Holding up a curled fist, he stopped his men from following behind him. These parasites were all his. With every step, one of the orange-clad humans loosed a shot, each one harmlessly splattering against his armor or swatted away to explode against the ground behind him. Yet, even as he drew within stone's throw of them, not one backed down or shied away. Instead, they slipped away from their covered firing positions and formed a line, linking arms like they're some kind of pathetic living barrier. Grovinson grinned, stopping only a pace away from the convicts and casually crossing his arms. "Pathetic! All you accomplished is making your foe stronger. How does it feel, knowing that all you did was for nothing?" The orange-clad men stonily stared back, drawing a sneer onto Grovinson's face as he lashed out, tearing the throat out of one's neck. He expected it to see terror and shock, but instead a soft, peaceful smile came to the human's face as they slowly went limp, kept on their feet by the men to the left and right. There was honor in that, Grovinson had to admit, but honor was useless to a dead man. "These whelps you lay down your life for, they will never know your name, never know who you are. Do you not see how idiotic this little stand of yours is? All you've done is slow us down and make sure that fates of those in that building are twice as gruesome as they would have been. All that for those who put you behind bars in the first place. What is it worth for brats who will never see you as more than criminals?" The men continued to silently stare back as Grovinson pulled his claw hand back, fingers curled to tear and maim, when a strangled voice, speaking through gritted teeth, made him freeze. "And they will never have to." The commander slowly swiveled on their heel claw, watching the utter contempt as the bestial humans slowly scooped their knife from the ground and fought their way to their feet. Cocking his head slightly, Grovinson shouted, "Shouldn't you be dead? I heard your heart stop." A tinge of genuine curiosity in his voice as the humans swayed on their feet, taking a step towards him. A blood-stained smile touched the human's lips as Grovinson felt an unimaginably ancient aura begin to radiate from the man. "Death was feeling lenient today. Lucky for me, unlucky for you." The human's breathing was ragged and uneven as they took a ponderous step forward, the power radiating off of them seeming to be the only thing driving their bloodless body forward. Grovinson took a step forward, intending to meet the undead convict halfway, relishing the opportunity to tear them limb from them. "No, and you hardly look able to fight. Death sure is, lady," he purred, marching closer. The convict dug into their pants pocket for a moment before throwing something at the Gagnosian commander. Grovinson snatched the object out of the air, taking a moment to see what it was. The commander stopped mid-step, blood running ice cold as he realized what he was holding. An artillery beacon sat in his palm. The small cylinder-shaped device, no larger than a tube of lip balm, pulsated rapidly with a soft green light before going solid red. "You see, you made one fatal mistake, Notion. You forgot that it was humanity who introduced the galaxy to mad." Robinson looked at the human dumbfounded. "That means we came into this expecting to die, yes? So do me a favor." The commander let the beacon slip from his bloody, clawed hand in shock as the human's grin grew manic yet again. "When you get to hell, tell them Connor sent you." Robinson lunged furiously at the grinning human as the first shell landed right between them. 2 weeks later, Agent Henry picked his way over the rubble, unable to shake the feeling that he was being watched, despite the invisibility spell hiding him from all the most astute observer. The distress signal was coming from just behind the next pile of rubble. Checking his locator, he confirmed his route and checked back with the Ultrabot's Revenge to confirm he hadn't come across any Gegnosian patrols. With a grunt, he clambered over the particularly large piece of rubble before losing his footing and falling onto his side. Groaning his displeasure, Henry rolled over slightly and almost soiled himself. The body of a Gegnosian Spec Ops trooper stared at him from an alcove beneath the piece of rubble he'd fallen off of. Their helmet was missing, revealing a look of sheer horror on their scaled face. Judging by the blood still oozing from their nostrils, Henry could tell this was a fresh body. Putting a hand on the shotgun's pistol grip, he got to his feet and continued over the pile of rubble, while scanning for whatever or whoever had left the Gegnosian Zediots in such a state. Reaching the top of the rubble pile, Henry almost couldn't believe his eyes. In the middle of a field of rubble and destruction was a school. The area around it was still clear of rubble for at least 100 feet in a perfect circle. With mountains of rubble serving as camouflage, Henry was about to rush forward, knowing that this distress beacon was activated by children when it felt as though something sharp was pressed to his throat. Henry straightened, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He felt as though an apex predator had slipped silently up behind him and had its claws around his throat. Taking several deep breaths to calm himself, he gently whispered, "Please, I need to get those kids off this planet. It's not safe for them here." Immediately, the hostile presence was gone. Instead, it now felt as though something was pushing him forward. Not wanting to piss off whatever dwelled within the rubble, he hurried down the side of the rubble mountain. A wind picked up, seemingly from nowhere as Henry reached the school's front doors. And, for a moment, he could have sworn he heard a voice whisper from within the wind, "Thank you." Looking around, he spotted no one. Henry disregarded the machinations of his overworked mind and yanked the doors open, rushing towards the room the beacon was set up in. Heart pounding frantically in his chest, he threw the reinforced door to the school lunchrooms open, simultaneously deactivating the invisibility spell. Never, not once in his life, would Henry have thought the terrified squeals of more than 100 children would make him cry tears of joy. But as he looked out over the scores of scared, dirty faces, he couldn't help but let the tears fall before reporting back to his ship. Kids, it's a whole damn school full. Get the shuttles ready." Henry cut himself off when a little girl gently tugged on his pant leg. Kneeling, he softly said, "Hey, what's up, kiddo? I'm not going to hurt you." Silently, the little girl held up a scrap of coarse, orange fabric with the city prison's logo on it. Gently taking the scrap of fabric, Henry gently, curiously asked, "What's this? Where'd you get that?" Instead of speaking, the little girl pointed to the wall behind him. Brows furrowed in confusion, Henry slowly turned around, jaw falling open. A massive mural covered the wall depicting 24 or more faceless men in orange jumpsuits, pointing what could be vaguely recognized as guns at a horde of purple monsters. Some of the guns had muzzle flashes rendered in yellow paint, while some of the men sported splotches of dark red in their jumpsuits. Yet, what really stood out to Henry was the pair of bright white and gold angel wings that each of the orange-clad faceless men had sprouted from their backs. At the top, painted in big bright orange stencil letters, were the words, "Unnamed, Unknown, Unforgotten." Reaching up, Henry slowly doffed his hat in reverence before bowing to the mural and softly stating, "Thank you, whoever you are, for your sacrifice. All of you." For a moment, Henry felt as though someone had set a hand on his shoulder before the feeling faded entirely. Hearing the rumble of a shuttle coming in for a landing, Henry snapped his top hat back onto his head and swiveled around. "All right, everyone, follow the line from youngest to oldest. Teachers, help everyone get organized. We should get off this planet by sunrise if we're fast." And of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.